Let's kick this one off, guys. Thanks for joining us again for what is now season 2, episode number 9. Mm-hmm. And Chris just said, we're not sure if there's anybody new here today, but if you missed it before, all of the previous Tech Talks are on YouTube. I know sometimes I get emails, I send links, and even bookmark Dan's playlist, which is the Tech Talk Tuesday playlist in YouTube. And to find us, you'll look for Baseline Web Training, which is all one word on YouTube. And then, like I said, the best way is to just bookmark it. Then you'll always be able to find the next episodes. Today, we're going to do a site study. And before we kick it off, let's do a quick introduction around the room. We have Chris Wright, our VP of Sales.
Howdy.
Then we have Dan Conger, our training manager. Myself, Andy Humphrey, irrigation technology consultant. And joining us today with a special welcome is Tracy Shields. Right, Tracy is hailing from Denver, Colorado, joining us Talk Tuesday today. Welcome, Tracy. So glad to have you.
Wise, sweet child of mine. There's no correlation there with Colorado. You need to play some Big Head Todd.
All right, Dan, it's all yours.
All right. So Tracy has a really interesting site in the Pacific Northwest that we wanted to share. This is what do we decide the best description of it? It's a travel.
It's a Fortune 500 travel company.
Thank you. Fortune 500 travel company, right? So it's a rather large corporate campus right on the waterfront, and there's some really cool things about it, and then there's some things that are kind of challenging. It's a little bit different than some of our other very, very complex configurations that we've looked at, but this still fits in with some of the things that we think are important and that Baseline does well. So Tracy and I are going to kind of walk through some of the site, and Tracy's going to take us on a virtual walkthrough of our site. So that is right here. So Tracy, tell us what we're seeing here on this first site.
So this is a really fun site, and although it may be somewhat simple on the irrigation side, I would say it's really unique and maybe a little complex on the horticulture side. So some really cool horticulture application and plant palette on this project. So this project's located in Seattle, Washington, and it's down on the waterfront on the far north end of the downtown waterfront in Seattle. So as you look in the entryway here, and you can see through the building, you're looking through to the harbor, out to the ocean there in Seattle. This little entryway courtyard here shows a bunch of Japanese katsura trees, which are very unique. They brought these trees in, and they stay super symmetrical. But one of the coolest things is when they are at the peak of their foliage change, they smell like cotton candy.
And you said that earlier, and I had a hard time believing that. And I'm a horticulture. I have a degree in horticulture. I'm like, I don't know anything. And then I looked it up, and it wasn't till you and I Googled katsura tree cotton candy. And you will get hits on that. And that's exactly, so it was in the fall when it blooms, right? And it was the flowers and the leaves have a really sugary smell.
Yeah.
Cool.
Very cool. Yeah.
Plants are fun.
The other thing horticulturally about those trees that we found was that it fits the site really well. It'll take salt spray. It'll take moist soil. It'll take probably some of the conditions that they're going to experience on this site.
Yeah, it was a great plant selection for this site.
So what are these lines we're seeing that kind of go into there? There's something you had said. There's a little bit of a story on that.
Yeah, so off to the right, and then it moves towards the center of the entryway. You can see there's rail from train rail embedded there, and they left all of that in because this used to be where they would bring rail cars in to load cargo and incoming and outgoing supply chain in and out of the ports. And then they did a little design with that tile going in is supposed to represent some of the ocean washing up onto the beach, and when it recedes, the turning over of the sand colors and And lots and lots of themes in this project with the architecture. You'll see in a later slide that building off to the right there at a distance is shaped like a cruise ship. And so you can see the cruise ship shape, and right off to the north of this site is where they load the cruise ships with passengers.
Right. Nice.
So, yeah, really, really a fun site.
So on my next one, there we go. So this is the other side of the building, right? We saw that this is the outside curve. Okay.
Yeah, now we're on the ocean side. So obviously here with all of that glass, we noticed as we were walking through the site last week that they're going to be dealing with some serious light reflection on that landscape. This faces west. And when we were there, you could see, we were walking through these pea gravel drainage areas, and you could see the reflected light through the pea gravel. And so we got to talking about how they're going to potentially have to manage some of that reflected light with the plant material.
So you get, as you walk through, you get a sunburn on just one side of your face, but not the other.
You got to walk both ways.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a substantial amount of turf that's surrounding the building too, right?
Oh, you haven't seen the half of it. When we see some satellite, we're going to see even more turf. It's pretty impressive how much turf they're going to have there. It's a good thing they're in Seattle, where they get, how much rain do they get there in Seattle? It's a lot, significantly more than I get down south. I'll put it that way.
And then we've got some unique presentations of plant materials in courtyards that are going to be shaded quite a bit and managed with moisture sensing. So they've got several moisture sensors across this site on each controller. We've got 3 3200 controllers and one base station 1000 controller that manages a green roof. So we've also got a sedum plant base on a green roof as well on the site.
I think I got a picture of that coming up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see. We'll talk about the challenges in a little bit, but I can see some. While this is very cool architecturally, I can see some things that will be tricky to take care of in this one for the maintenance contractor.
Absolutely, yeah. The programming of the controller to manage the different hydrozones for the different plant material and their water requirement could be very interesting, huh?
The air circulation,
alleyways and paver streets that have got, storied buildings going through there that I don't know how much, other than in the peak of the day, that they're actually going to get much sunlight.
True. Yeah. It's a little bit, it reminds me of some pictures of San Francisco, where it's like, there's 3 days a year where there's this much sun. It's like, this is Seattle.
Yep. There's the cruise ship. And then you notice some of the hill, they did a lot of hilling, and this is the beginning of a water feature that wasn't on last week. But the landscape got all these rolling hills in it, and they curve like this, and they represent the wake that the cruise ship creates as it, travels through the ocean. And so you see all this rippling of the landscape and the curves coming off the architecture of the building and such.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Now, do you think you would have noticed that if someone hadn't told you about that?
You'd have to be pretty observant, but once somebody says something, it's like the whole site comes alive. Like, you're like, oh wow, look at that. I didn't see that.
Yeah, they point it out.
Yeah. And so you've got some steep slope. Yeah.
Right.
So we've got
from an irrigation perspective, I can see challenges just off the chart with like overspray and runoff and having to cycle and soak and all of that.
Yeah.
Different exposures.
Yep.
Cool.
Oh, okay. Then we got the cheese.
Look at
that. Who's that guy?
Yeah.
You realize you're wearing the same outfit today?
No, I'm not.
How embarrassing.
I actually put this vest on because the patterns in your shirt make those weird little ripply things in the video. So
So there's those rail lines coming in. I was going to say there's not much in the way of horticulture, but now I'm seeing the trees and those planters in that area. So there's another challenging area there. We got glass on 3 sides and stone. So
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so here's one of our first satellite images. So you can see we see the rail line there on the right hand side, and then didn't you say you came in over a bridge?
Yeah, if you see there across the rail, there's a bridge that comes across. So at least as of now, when you Uber or Lyft into this site, it pings you to that little land bridge right there that goes over the rail. Mm-hmm. And then you come into a security gate. The main entrance is a little more hidden and unique to find, and it's not the main address, apparently.
So, and then this is one of the few times that this is a Bing satellite image, and Bing actually was more current than the Google site images. So, but when this was taken, obviously still under construction. Is the construction complete or for the most part complete?
Yeah, construction is complete. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this brown and green, that's the green roof? That's
the green roof.
Okay.
Yep, and we've got a base station 1000 up there to manage that with some soil moisture sensors, and it's a no access, so it's not actually a garden per se that you could go sit in or experience. It's a sedum green roof.
Okay. So yeah, I'd be curious to see that up close at some point, because I know there's a couple different shades of green of sedum, but I'd be interesting to see if that's what the brown is too, a brown sedum. Okay. But relatively low water use, needs well-drained soil, but it still needs water. So it might get enough with rainwater, it might not, you don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a question that came in, irrigation related. Want to know how many POCs are running into this site, managed landscape?
So we've got 4 POCs.
Okay, so a lot of water supply, obviously a big site. Andy, from your perspective, what does the design intent look like on this project?
Well, I was just going to say, Tracy, if I heard you correctly, there's 3 3200s and 1 1000, right? So sounds like 1 POC per controller, which is, a simpler layout, more traditional, right? It's got a traditional hydraulic layout. Is that also, Tracy, because each controller was maxing out zone count, or how did they decide on 3 3200s?
They're not totally maxing out zone counts, but they're very large zone controllers. So yeah, that has something to do with it. It's just simply running out of zones. And then you can see these large turf areas, which eat up a lot of the zones, is all intended to be sports fields.
Okay. And that can make sense too, from a usability perspective, having a dedicated controller for the sports fields, so they don't interfere with landscape zones, even though we could on 1 controller. Sometimes that's just a better way to do it.
Also segments it out for, troubleshooting purposes. If they ever have a problem on 1 controller, it doesn't impact all the others, perhaps.
Right.
Oh.
And Tracy, how many, you may get to this later, but how many moisture sensors are they using around the site? Do you know?
We've got, I think, it's about 12 to 15 moisture sensors per 3200.
Oh,
okay.
Wow. That many.
So significant amount.
A great number of moisture sensors around the site.
Mm-hmm. And do you know, or could you observe when you were there, if they're using it in a lower threshold mode, upper threshold, or just data collection?
They'll be using it. Right now, it's just data collection through establishment, but this spring, when they turn on, they'll be in lower threshold.
Okay. So now, Chris, I can better answer your question, knowing more about the site and the possible design intent.
Brilliant.
It sounds like, due to the number of moisture sensors that were installed, they want to not irrigate unless it reaches a dry threshold, that probably being one of the most important pieces, considering it's Seattle, considering that the rain frequency is higher than where Dan lives down in San Diego, that there's really no reason to irrigate unless the soil dries out to a lower limit, as you just mentioned. And yes, we can turn it off while it's raining, but it doesn't really tell us when it's time to irrigate again. And so if I had to guess, it probably won't water a lot if it is a rainy season, because it may never reach that lower threshold. Or if it does, it'll take a considerable time, once a week, once every 6 days, however that plays out based on rain frequency.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you keep mentioning that it is Seattle and that it does rain a lot. But in reality, Seattle has a pretty significant dry season as well during the summer months, where, because of the microclimate, the water holding capacity in the soil, I mean, it does dry out pretty quickly. So they need to be able to respond quickly to that so they don't suffer any kind of plant damage.
Yeah, I was going to throw out the green roof, right? So we're going to have a media that dries out really quick, that doesn't have much moisture holding capacity. And while it may rain a lot, the frequency of it may not be enough to keep the plant material happy and healthy. So that's where soil moisture sensing on a green roof is just, enormous, having that ability there.
Definitely. So a question came in, and we'll likely get to this, but, with the sensors that are installed on site, how do you know where they are? Is there some kind of physical marker of where they are?
Yeah. Yep. And I believe Dan's going to dive deeper into this site again next week. And the installing contractor had gone through and marked all of the moisture sensors and zones through our mobile access and GPS locating device. So they would stand out on a valve box or wherever they wanted to mark that moisture sensor and pin it, and it would drop a marker into the map in Base Manager.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I in preparation, I looked at their map as well. So they do have their soil moisture sensors and valve markers located on the map as well. Whether they actually have a physical, marker, a flag, or a grading whisker or anything like that I don't know. But knowing, having a good record a good record of where they're placed is enormously important.
Yeah. And if you're new to sensors, one common mistake we see is the sensors are buried and people forget to write down the serial number of that sensor. So you search, in this case, Tracy, there could be 48 sensors out there. And if you just search for them all, you'll find 48 serial numbers, but you won't know where they were buried unless you recorded that during installation. And I've seen it often. And if there are, a half dozen or so, you can, by process of eliminating, find sun and shade and things like that based on soil temperature to isolate some. And then otherwise, I've seen people that just have to turn on and come back in an hour and see which sensor moved. Why make all that much work for yourself? Let's record the information when you install it and do it once. Mm-hmm.
So Tracy, I wanted to kind of dive into a couple of the challenges on that site. So let's talk about the green roof first, and then we'll move into the next one. So on the green roofs, what are some of the challenges that you've seen associated with that green roof, or a green roof in particular? We kind of touched on a couple of them, but we could recap.
Yeah. So on this particular one, it's not that old yet, but typical green roof. You're going to have good drainage, right? And you're going to have a soil medium that's going to dry out pretty quickly. So you're going to constantly want to be irrigating that site without over irrigating it.
Right. Okay. So well drained, and then yes, the soil moisture sensors are going to play in on that one.
And come July, they get pretty hot. So you're going to heat that green roof up.
Yep.
Right.
But keep in mind that sensor is a tool, so it's up to the irrigator or the horticulturalist or the site manager to determine what they want to do with that data. I have seen green roofs where once established, they know that it can take 2 weeks of any drought condition before water needs to be reapplied. But that's up for the horticulturalist to determine, using our tools and looking at that data.
Right. So the other one that I thought that there were several subpoints to this one was microclimates. There are so many different microclimates, and it's related. A lot of it is related to the building. So what were some of them that we talked about on the microclimates?
Yeah. So on the bow of the ship, so to speak. The maintenance contractor is already starting to notice some building shadow of rain, and the direction that the rain comes into the site is actually shadowing some of the rain that it takes. So there's portions of the landscape that is not getting wet when the rest of it's getting extremely wet.
Yeah, rain shadows, and I used to run into that with the rain shadow with the rain sensor or rain switch. Right, if you put it in the wrong side of the building, you forget which way that it comes in, and you may not know, and they may not have known that during the design phase, what that might be like. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then some of the other environmental factors being so close to the ocean right there, they're going to get a lot of splash and spray with wind coming off of the ocean. So they're going to have a lot of salt that's going to get thrown onto plant material. And
so at some point, they may need to do some leaching to flush those salts through, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we touched on the reflected light on those turf areas or anywhere in that landscape area.
Yeah, even on the tree foliage, it'll be an issue.
Yeah. Okay. And then the inverse on that is those tight courtyards, right? Where we have shade, some very shaded areas. Then we'll get the same sunlight as something that's just right around the corner. And then the last one that I had on my list was that overhang, right? We earlier we saw that walkway in a shaded courtyard. Well, the plant material that's underneath that isn't going to see any rainfall, or it's likely it's not going to see any rainfall, and it's going to receive less light than what's adjacent to it. So that's another little microclimate. So the ability to have soil moisture sensors in lots of different places is really important. I'm glad that they have as many as they do. Andy, have you ever run across this when someone when the sensor says that this area is too wet, but it's hydraulically tied into another zone, or if it's a sunny area and a shady area together?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that the idea is not to put a sensor in every zone, right? That's doable, but only preferred if the site is very small, maybe like a 3 or 4 or 6 zone green roof. Otherwise, the idea is to create a grouping of zones that are similar that one sensor controls. So in the case that you just mentioned, if there was some sun or some shade or some slope or differences between zones, then that comes down to that linking ratio. So if the zone were in the shade, but it was being controlled by the sensor, which is in the sun, which is what we recommend, to put the sensor in the sun, the zone that's the shade, you may link it over at 65% of the water because it's in the shade.
Perfect. That's exactly what I want to get into next week. I want to jump into the programming of that to see how we would adjust for those individual ones.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, you could use one soil moisture sensor is equivalent to one weather station.
Yeah.
True. Yep. And then utilizing the number of programs available can help to also manage a lot of those unique microclimates that exist as well, right?
Yeah.
So 4 or 6 programs, maybe the limiting factor as to what you can do to manage your volume of water and the water window you have available to you. So having more programs available can help to eliminate some of those programming concerns.
Yeah.
We had a question, just to step back on the POCs. We had a question about consideration for a flow station. I think it's actually a great question because it'll allow us to speak for a minute about what the flow station could offer this site and maybe why they don't have it. So as we sort of mentioned, there was 4 controllers and there's 4 points of connection. Every controller has its own. And the first use case for a flow station is to share a point of connection between multiple controllers. So on this site, that's not happening. There's no shared flow between controllers. And then the other sort of use case for flow station is to do sub metering, where you want more flow meters downstream on your main line to either record flow or take action on that flow in a sub metering fashion. And so Tracy didn't speak to that, so I'll just assume that that's not happening, but that capability lives in the flow station, not in the 3200. So those are kind of the 2 most popular use cases for a flow station. And I don't think either of them was required here.
Yeah.
But if they, so essentially, if they wanted to break out what the one sports field was using versus the other sports field, that would be, you could isolate sections of the main line and record and take action with that using the flow station.
Yep. Where the flow meter is downstream of another flow meter, that would be flow station capability.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Or pressure.
It's interesting to have sports turf on a corporate campus too, right? So all of that sports turf is intended for intramural sports from corporate teams inside, and they want them to be playing soccer on extended breaks and volleyball and all kinds of different intramural type sports that they'll form teams from within and go out and play out there.
Very cool.
Yeah. I think somebody asked about the turf out there too. It's Kentucky bluegrass and rye blend.
Wow. Okay. I meant to take some measurements on that before we started, but there's just untold acres of turf out there. So just mowing turf is going to be a lot of maintenance effort there. So that's impressive in its own right.
All right. So next week we continue on with this site, right? We're going to jump more into some of the complexities associated with the irrigation system.
Right. So what I'd like to do is we're going to delve into soil moisture sensors and how those would work with microclimates, how it would dial those in, and then kind of talk about green roofs considerations. And then we'll probably take a look at intelligent cycle and soak as well, and how that would fit in with the sensors, but also fit in for some of the sloping terrain. So yeah, I want to dive down, like less flow, but more horticulturally and best management practices for the same site.
Awesome.
Great.
Very good. All right. We don't have any other questions coming in. We're kind of ahead of the curve today by a couple minutes, which is just fine. But we want to thank everybody for participating today. Again, if you've got colleagues that you work with that you think they may benefit from these discussions and want to learn more about how baseline works and how to apply the technology, please invite them to join us. So Andy dropped the registration link in the chat. You can take that, copy it, just forward it on to someone else that you work with that may benefit from what we talk about every week. Nice. So again, thanks for joining us, and we look forward to coming back next week with more information about this site and get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty on the irrigation programming. Awesome. So with that,
thanks guys.
Have a good week. Be safe, work hard, and if you need more additional information, let us know.
Awesome.
So I'm out.
See you all next week.
See you then, guys.
Now that awkward moment when everybody's trying to find the leave button. All right. Bye.